Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NextGen Planners podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm the head of community experience here at NextGen Planners. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Ola from All Things Money. Here she is. How you doing, Ola?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, I think we're both very busy at this current period of time, aren't we? Yeah, it should be good though. It should be. I'm really excited to have you on. I've been following the stuff that you've been doing for a while, and I think it's going to be very valuable for our audience to learn a bit more about what you're trying to do and the kind of profile that you've built. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today. So for anyone who doesn't know Ola, she is the founder and creator of I guess you could describe it as a content channel, but there's lots of different things that Ola's involved with, of All Things Money, which you may have come across in the past. Big following on things like Instagram and stuff, but I'll let Ola tell you all about that. But the main aim of all of this kind of stuff is to provide young adults with financial education, which is obviously something that we talk a lot about on the podcast, and it's something that our community is really trying to solve as well. So it's great to have you on, Ola. But I don't want to straw person you into telling people what your day job is or what you get up to on a daily basis. So in your words, what does a typical day in the life of Ola look like?
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, firstly, Dan, and thank you for having me on the show. Like you kindly mentioned, I am the founder of All Things Money, which is an online platform that is designed to teach young adults how to manage their finances effectively. So we cover a wide range of personal finance topics, from budgeting and saving to investing and everything else in between. We are mainly on Instagram, but we also have a podcast. We do events, we do online workshops, we have ebooks, everything, you name it. So everything we have designed to, I say we, me, designed to kind of help young people become financially literate.
It's a fantastic objective, and when I was looking through the podcast episodes and your stuff, your stuff comes up a lot on my social media channels. I'm a qualified financial planner, but even still, I'm thinking, oh wow, I didn't even know that. Or like it's just amazing. Like it's a minefield out there of things that we have to learn about money. And there's lots of people who are having conversations about where that responsibility to be more financially literate lies. Yeah. And I think what the work that you're doing is certainly one of the things that is helping massively. There's no, we haven't done any data. Maybe you have on kind of financial literacy levels, but I can imagine that the great work that you and the people that you work with are doing will be helping with that, definitely. And I think one of the issues is that money for, I don't know, centuries, of generations has been a hugely taboo topic, and partially because of struggles with money, partially because women could only have bank accounts, what was it, 50 years ago or something, which I always is absolutely crazy to even think of. So the taboos, we can clearly see why the taboos are there, but they do exist. Money is famously not something that we talk about around the dinner table with our family and friends and that kind of stuff, but maybe it's changing nowadays. And that's what I kind of want to just kind of start off with. Are you seeing any trends in terms of the people that you have in your audience, the people that you come across, the people that you work with in those workshops? Are you seeing a trend? Like, is that changing? Is talking about money becoming more normal nowadays with the different generations, or how do you see it?
I wouldn't say it's become more normal. I do think the taboo and stigma around talking about money is still there. However, I know there are more people that are wanting to speak about money more, which is great to see. So yeah, there are views and attitudes around money and how we talk about it. They are shifting in the fact that more people want to talk about it. However, I don't think we've crossed that bridge where it's no longer a taboo. So we still have a lot of work to do in that area.
And do you think that again, this is quite a boring question, to be honest, but do you think that the kind of rise in accessibility of information, for instance, 20 years ago there was no social media channels which would be talking about money, but like that's why I asked this question, is are we seeing any impact of the accessibility of information nowadays? Like, do you think that's coming into this conversation a little bit, and that's maybe why we're having more conversations and wanting to have more conversations about money?
Yeah, I think because financial education has become so readily available across social media now, especially your TikTok and your Instagram, I think that views about money, well, I think more people are now becoming aware of how little they don't know. So I think that has really caused that huge shift in the fact that, I'm being taught this on Instagram. I was never taught it in school. Let me see if my friends know about it, or if my mum knows about this, or X, Y, Z. So I think the conversation is churning, and that I definitely think social media has helped. But like I said, I do think we still have a long way to go.
I would definitely agree with that. I would 100% agree with that. Just talking to my friends, for instance, I mean, it's easy to when you learn about this kind of stuff, and once you have knowledge about it, it's easy to look back and think, how do more people not understand this kind of stuff? But then you're thinking about it from the perspective of somebody who knows it, and it's hard to get inside the brain sometimes of those who don't understand money and don't understand finance, because it is such a confusing topic. It really, really is. So let's just get inside the brain of the people that you work with, if as much as we can anyway, certainly in relation to personal finance. Firstly, can you just give us a summary of the kind of, if you could think of a typical somebody in your audience, what do they look like? Like what is their characteristics in terms of like maybe a customer persona or something like that?
Oh, good question. So the majority of my following is around 80% women, and they fall into the 18 to 35-year-old age bracket. So some may have gone to uni, some may have not. A lot of them really that do follow my page just kind of want to better their finances and understand more. Again, like we know, we're not talking about personal finances in school. So that's kind of like the persona of people that kind of follow me on there.
And you said there that they want to learn more about money, but kind of, have you identified what things have you identified that are really kind of that they're really struggling with, that they don't have a good grasp on, that they're wanting to find really more information about? What kind of things that you cover, and what kind of things do they find really valuable?
I think really the absolute basics. So, how to budget effectively, how to start saving, how can you save effectively and reach your money goals, and also how to invest in the stock market. I think investing has become such a hot topic recently, with loads of apps becoming more accessible. We're seeing discussions about investing all over social media, especially YouTube and TikTok. Those three main topics are really popular. And I'd also probably add like mortgages and your credit scores as well. I think they're ones that, again, we're not taught about in school, so people are always keen and eager to learn more about.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we hear all the time is, you don't learn about a mortgage or anything like that until you actually are getting one. There's nothing else really. I mean, there's a lot of things in life that we learn whilst we're doing them, but not as big or not as scary or not as important as something like a mortgage, for instance. And I think that's really, I'm constantly, and the more I talk about this, the more I'm baffled by the fact that is the case, that we don't learn about these kind of things until we're actually going through them, when they could have massive impacts on our future situation. I mean, when you think of the people in your audience, imagine the amount of financial mistakes they have already made by the time they are 35, and how simple it could have been with a sprinkle of financial education, whether it's at school or after school, whatever it might be, to not have made those financial mistakes. It's baffling. It really is. It's interesting that you say about investing, actually, because obviously we all know about the media's attitude towards this kind of stuff. For instance, there's a common phrase in financial planning circles, which is, we never hear about billions getting wiped onto the stock market. We always just hear about things being, wiped off, or investments losing value. And, certainly with these uncertain times at the moment, you'd think that would mean that people are a bit more wary about investing. But it's interesting that you actually say that they're more interested in investing as well, which is really, really cool. So I'd say the interest comes from the fact that everyone's talking about investing one way or another. Whether they decide to actually invest their own money is a different topic, but a lot of people want to understand what investing means and what it means to have money in the stock market, what it means when something has crashed, etc., because we've seen such huge fluctuations in the stock market because of COVID and the cost of living crisis and everything else. That I think a lot of conversations kind of steered towards investing and what it means, to be honest with you. I think that's it, as well as I think there's more options becoming available, and as a result, I think that also adds into it. For instance, there's green investing or sustainable investing out there. There's new alternative investments like cryptocurrency and stuff, which we're not going to cover, by the way, today. But there's all these kind of things that are just being thrown into the equation that just make it a massive melting pot of confusing terms for people. So I think that probably comes into it as well. The obviously when we think about our audience, who are financial planners mainly, or certainly financial professionals, I think there's again, something we always talk about is the fact that certainly the people in mine and your generation and the generation in your audience, we're not great at reaching out and getting financial planning, or certainly not
Yeah.
paying for it anyways. And
Yes.
I think we've identified one of the problems, or one of the reasons for this, is that it's just our profession just isn't relatable still. There's a lot of work being done to try and make it more relatable and trying to kind of plug that gap of people not getting advice. But from your perspective, and this is a massive question, I'm so sorry for this question in advance, but what do you think that financial planners or financial professionals can do to make financial planning more relatable to our generation, to younger adults? What do you think we can do?
That's a good question. I think we need more people that look like us that are financial planners. Slightly younger. I came across a crazy stat, I think, the other day, that there isn't many financial planners under the age of 30. So already, that alienates a lot of young people that want to maybe seek a financial planner, because again, they don't maybe relate to the people they're seeing. I'd also say that there's a stigma that to have a financial planner, you have to be mega rich. So I think there needs to be debunking of that myth as well, because there's lots of people that are currently that have pensions. They might come into wealth if a loved one has passed on money onto them, and they could do with using a financial planner. But again, I think there's that huge stigma attached to financial planners that you have to be a millionaire to actually go and seek one.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that is self-inflicted. I think a lot
Yeah.
of, again, I'm not tarring everybody with the same brush, but a lot of people do have minimum service or minimum amounts of money, for instance. So it's not like that stigma there that you just mentioned has come from nowhere. It's actually a lot of financial planning businesses do still require people to have a certain amount of wealth. Now, we're not going to argue about that today. There's different conversations around that, but I do agree that is adding to the kind of unrelatability, or whatever we want to call it. The stat you mentioned, by the way, I think it's that there's more financial planners who are over the age of, I think it might have been 70, than that are under the age of 30. And if you think about it, that is crazy, because when you're under 30, the amount of working population under 30 compared to the amount of working population over 70 is, in all other sectors, it is massively imbalanced towards the under 30s. But our profession is just a massive anomaly, and it stands out. And I think that's the reason why the stats just look so crazy. But yeah, I agree with what you mentioned was representation. So people who look like us, and that doesn't just mean age. It means gender. It means ethnicity. It means even things like sexual orientation. I know some fantastic financial planners who are diverse from all sorts of different angles, and they only work with certain types of clients, and that really does make it more relatable. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. One of the things you mentioned was that I don't know whether it ties into this, but you mentioned about needing a certain amount of money before you can access a financial planner. I think so. One of our friends at NextGen, Chanel Pattinson. I don't know if you know Chanel. She did some research on another reason that people don't get financial planning when they're young adults is that they think it's going to cost too much, or they think they can't afford it, for instance. But is that because, like, what do you think is the reason for this? Is it because people aren't willing to pay for it? I mean, from your perspective, how willing do you think young adults actually are to paying for professional advice, or is it something else? What do you think that comes into this conversation?
I think it comes down to lack of education. So, people assume a financial planner is something you get when you're mega rich. Like I said, you've seen that it's portrayed in films, XYZ, or you might know a friend or a friend who's really, really rich and their dad consults with their financial planner, etc., etc. So I think it comes down to lack of understanding what a financial planner is, what services they offer, and how much they cost. Because again, you can't just Google sometimes and be like, how much does this financial planner cost? Or I just want to ask a financial planner a question. How much is my question going to cost me? So again, it comes down to not knowing and understanding, which again, this is why it's great work that what you guys are doing and things like that show, financial planning can be accessible to people, because believe it or not, there are a lot of young people that do come into wealth, or they do have enough money to have a financial planner. They're just not aware that they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. There was a report done as well by the guys at Open Money. I think it was maybe a couple of years ago now, and they actually found that our generation, young adults or certain younger generations were actually willing to pay for advice at some point in the future. So I don't think it's I agree with you. It's not the willingness. I think they'll pay for something if they think it's going to be valuable, but they're not necessarily seeing the value of financial planning because it's either hidden or it's either being purposefully hidden from them. I don't know. There's lots of different things that could come into this conversation, but yeah, that's really interesting. And when we think of financial literacy itself, we're talking obviously about being literate with your finances, having a good understanding of personal finance, knowing even just the basics of money. I was talking to somebody today from a charity called Red Start, which is a brilliant organisation where they have regions all around the UK. They get volunteers to come and help them run workshops, and they're going into primary schools and they're teaching year 1 and year 2 children even just the basics of money. I don't know about you, Ola, but I never had anything like that when I was at school.
Neither did I.
I had no kind of no comprehension about money at all. Not even in secondary school. I didn't even have any idea about money in secondary school. But let's just say, for a hypothetical, the great work that you're doing and the great work that Red Start and other organisations are doing increased the financial literacy in the UK by even just a figure such as maybe 20%, 25%. What kind of, again, this is a massive question, so I'm sorry about this, but what kind of impact do you think that would have on society as a whole? Because I'm just trying to get to the point of how important this stuff actually is. What impact do you think that higher financial literacy would actually have on society?
Good question. I think it will reduce the number of financial mistakes being made, so that we can see, maybe less mortgages being repossessed, in the fact that, a lot of people recently didn't realise that their interest rates on their mortgage can increase, and not to the level we have seen recently, which has sadly resulted in lots of people having their homes repossessed because they didn't account for the fact that, their mortgage rate isn't going to stay the same forever. Hopefully we might see less people falling into debt, because again, understanding how to use credit wisely and responsibly can have a huge impact on how people are using credit and debt. Also, just generally in terms of how you can budget and save your money effectively. Again, having that level of financial confidence can also allow people just to navigate adulthood very wisely and confidently, like we need to see.
Yeah, I think so. The things you mentioned there are more down to the avoiding mistakes, which is great, like avoiding, for instance, repossession on mortgages and things like that. But I'd kind of like to think of as well of the positive things that would come out of it. So that those are positives of avoiding mistakes. But also wealth, for instance, wealth create. If you understood, like, let's just say, for instance, compound interest. Can you remember when you actually learned about the power of compound interest?
I learned about compounding in school, but not compound interest. And that was only until I finished uni and I actually was like, oh, I'm going to now invest in the stock market. Now I'm like, oh, I understand what compounding is, and now how I can see how it benefits my finances.
Yeah. So even just kind of, spending an hour with someone, explaining to them what the power of compound interest and how it can have such the difference, for instance, in investing when you're 25 versus 35. I think that's one of the most powerful graphics that that financial planners can show their clients, certainly younger clients, because then it actually turns into a real life thing, rather than just saying, oh yeah, I know it's better to start early, but I don't have any money at the moment. They can be so powerful. So I'm just trying to think of the positives as well can you think of anything else that would, it would leave a positive impact on society rather than just negative, avoiding mistakes? What kind of positive things do you think it would do to society?
Well, I think people would just be overall financially empowered, so they'd have hopefully bigger savings account, big amount of money being saved. Maybe their education how to invest and multiply their wealth by investing in the stock market. They might feel empowered by starting their own businesses, things like that. You would probably see a higher number of people going down this route if there was financial literacy being taught.
And maybe even money being talked about at the dinner table, which is something that right now seems like it's absolutely to some people. I think that it just seems like it's never going to be achieved, because let's be honest, it's not the most exciting topic in the world, even though we talk about it all day long. To the majority of people, it's not the most exciting topic. So but even just that would help massively as well.
Definitely.
Another big question for you, Ola. So if I've done this before and it's actually been really interesting, if I was to give you 3 wishes, so if I was, is it the genie in Aladdin? If I was the genie in Aladdin, and I do the thing with the lamp and I give you 3 wishes to change financial education or financial literacy in this country, what 3 things, and this might be difficult, what 3 things would you wish for that would happen?
Good question. I would wish, is that like in terms of like topics, subjects being taught, or just generally?
You can have 6 wishes if it means all of those things. So you fire away and give me as many as you can.
Oh, okay. I would see financial education being taught to children as young as 7 in schools. Now, there's like a stat or research shows that money habits can be developed from as young as 7, so I'd see that being taught. I'd also would love to see investing as a whole topic being taught in schools. Whether or not the FCA would ever allow something like that's another topic for another day. But I definitely think the FCA, investing needs to be taught, because again, it allows people to multiply their wealth. And what else? I'd probably say money was no longer a taboo subject, because if we removed the taboo around money, then you'd see more people talk about pay and work. You see more people talk about money in their families, and hopefully that would have a positive impact when it comes to narrowing the pay gap, narrowing the gender gap in terms of credit scores, things like that. Those would be my 3 main wishes, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing when you have these conversations to see the other things, the kind of ripple effect that it has. So, for instance, I've never really thought about the impact that it would have on the gender pay gap, for instance, or the gender pension gap and all that kind of stuff. For instance, I've never really thought about it. It's a pure ripple effect. It really is. I love your idea about getting investing taught on the curriculum. By the way, I think there's a lot of different. Like for instance, there's people always say, don't they, you learn about Pythagoras' theorem at school, but you never use it in your life unless you're a mathematician, for instance. I think that's sometimes a bit of a lazy analogy to use, but it is true.
It's true.
But I think there's lots of things that we don't get taught at school about life that we learn whilst we're doing them in life, and even just some kind of comprehension of it, that it's going to happen. I think that would be really, really useful. There's tons of things that we could, kids would never go home from school if we taught them everything that they need to know about life. And I don't think that would go down very well with children, would it? Certainly not. Okay, that was really useful. I love when it opens up the conversation about different areas of society as well. For instance, entrepreneurship. I think I completely agree with you on there. More entrepreneurs would definitely take the risks completely. So I want to switch a little bit, because obviously the context of how I found the stuff that you've been doing, and a lot of people find you, is through social media. And according to your stuff that you put out there, I think it's probably changed, but you've got over 21,000 followers on social media. Now that is a figure which I would imagine when you were starting this at the start, you would never think that you'd have that many people. So I don't think that you planned for that to happen, but it's a happy accident if that's what we want to describe it as. And I actually think, people in the audience will probably be tired of me banging on about this, but I actually think that social media can be huge for financial planners, especially if they're looking to work with younger generations like you are. So What tips would you give those guys in the audience on building a following on social media? What things did you do right that you would look back and think, I'm glad I did that? And maybe
Yeah.
even what things have you done that you wouldn't do again if you were trying to grow your audience?
Good question. Number one definitely is about consistency. That is something that when I first started, I was very good at. I was really good at being consistent and pushing out content regardless of the outcome of the metrics. So I was just churning out content. And I did it because I loved it. I think, a lot of people want to grow big followings on social media, but might not necessarily love what they're chatting about. So it's really important that whatever you're putting out there, whether it's, if you're a financial planner, you're putting out financial planning tips or just general tips out there, you need to make sure you love it and you love what you're doing. Otherwise you won't be consistent. So that's my biggest one. And then two, I'd say definitely networking, collaborating with other people in the space that are doing very similar works to you. That's something I've really honed in on during the lockdown. I used to do like blog posts for like other large communities, used to do Instagram lives with others as well, which have really helped me grow my online following at the time. And I guess another tip is to share your platform or whatever work you're doing wherever you can. I used to shout about it everywhere. I used to be in so many like Facebook groups, which I used to really share all things money in. And there's people now that are in communities that I am a part of, and they might be like, I'm looking for some tips. Do you have any advice? And I'd completely direct them to all things money. So yeah, definitely consistency, networking, and shouting about what you do.
I agree, and the loving what you do, I think, is hugely important. Passion is something that you cannot put on passion like a cloak. It needs to run through every single thing in your body, because your audience can tell when you're passionate about something and when you're not, and when you're faking it. What's the plan with All Things Money then? Where I mean, have you thought about that? Where do you hope it gets to? Are you going to launch a professional body? Are you going to launch a financial planning business? What's the plan?
Good question, Dan. Everyone always asks me this question, and if I'm honest, I don't know. I take every day as it comes. Like we said, this was like a happy accident. I didn't think All Things Money would get to where it is today. I never thought it'd be my full-time job. So honestly, I'm just kind of riding the waves of where it will lead us. In an ideal world, we'd have a podcast that's in person. I'd be doing more live events. We have our next one coming up in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, really honing in on like more in-person things is probably my end goal, because as much as social media is the majority of my platform, I don't love it as much as I used to. So yeah, just trying to find other streams of growing All Things Money.
That's good. And whilst we're thinking about the future, what kind of things do you think that you'll be really excited about in the world of finance over the next 10 years? So if we think back over the last 10 years, cryptocurrency was just getting started. It's slightly bigger now. I mean, again, we're not going to touch on cryptocurrency today because that is a bit of a taboo topic sometimes. But even things like green investing, for instance, ESG, sustainable investing, they weren't really a thing 10 years ago, where they are massive nowadays. So what are you really excited to see over the next 10 years? What do you think is really growing at the moment that you're really excited about?
Definitely, this sounds really boring and dull, but definitely the digitalization of banks, in the fact that there's so many new fintech apps that are coming up right now that, sadly traditional banks are being left behind. So I'll be keen to see how they kind of evolve if they decide to, because, it's a very traditional sector. So that's definitely one thing that I'm looking forward to. And also seeing how the development of investing becomes, because again, we're seeing loads of these investing apps now that allow people to invest as little as £1. So I'll be keen to see how that kind of develops and evolves over the next 10 years, because I'm sure this isn't just the beginning of these kind of apps. I'm trying to think, is that, and I'd be keen to just see how the evolvement of financial influencers kind of grow as well over time in the next 10 years. I think the FCA, hopefully in the next 10 years, will warm up to us a lot more. They'll see us as people they would want to work with and aren't a threat to the financial institutions. So that would be a big one that I'd be keen to see evolve as well.
That last one's an interesting one. I'm not gonna talk too much about that, but no, I agree. I think the banking one is really interesting. I always say this as well. The kind of complete restructure and facelift of banking following the 2008 crisis has been extraordinary. Like if you think of some of the challenger banks nowadays, they're not even challenger banks anymore. They're leading banks. Like we think of people like I'm not going to mention any names, but we think you can. That's absolutely fine. But we think of some of those people, for instance, they've started as challengers and now they are integral to a lot of people's lives, and it's been great to see that. So I don't think it's a boring one at all. I think it's an interesting one. Final question for you, Ola. So we do like to ask all of our guests for a book that has helped them in their career so far. I've since put this out to things like if you want to recommend a podcast, or if you want to recommend a movie or something like that, something that has had a big impact on you, that's changed your way of thinking, what would you recommend our audience to consume?
Yeah, so what started off the very beginnings of my thinking around money and how little I personally knew was a book called Money, A User's Guide by Laura Waitley. I think she's updated it since I last read it, but an amazing book that goes through the very basics of your finances in a non-jargon way. Really, really good. And it just really opens your whole eyes to the world of ISAs, the world of bills, taxes, everything, you name it. So yeah, that is definitely my number one top recommendation.
Very good. I think that is actually the first time that book has been recommended on our podcast.
Oh, really?
So that's good. Usually stuff gets mentioned once or twice, but that's good. We've never had that one. So was it Money, A User's Guide by Laura Waitley? Was it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Well, thank you so much, Ola. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your time. But we do like to give the last word to our guests to say a big thank you for coming on to the show. So plug away. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us how to connect with you, and leave us with any last thoughts as well.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Dan. And if you want to find me, then you can find me mainly on Instagram at allthingsmoney_. The same for our Twitter and TikTok. We also have a podcast, which is the All Things Money podcast. And like I mentioned, we have a range of personal finance ebooks as well, which you can find at www.allthingsmoney.com.
Great stuff. Fantastic job. So thank you so much, Ola. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and I'm sure we'll speak very, very soon. So that was Ola from All Things Money on the NextGen Planners podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can share it on all social media channels, and people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our website, which is nextgenplanners.co.uk. Again, sorry to plug, but we've got loads of stuff on there about the training contract to help you become a financial planner, the advice stack to help you launch your own financial planning business, our amazing community of over 1,000 members, and lots more stuff that we have here at NextGen, and our conference, which might have already been by the time this podcast is released. So if so, I apologize in advance. But yeah, find out more information about NextGen, and if you could leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, that'll be really, really useful. So please leave us a rating review after you've listened to this podcast. But for now, that is all from us. So a big thank you once again to Ola for joining us on today's show. Thank you guys for listening as always, and we will see you in the next one. Bye bye.